So, guys, I do want to talk about Jim Cornette's response to the CM Punk footage. And, I do agree with a lot of the things that Jim Cornette is saying. And, I also just want to tell you guys that, I did like a road trip video where I went to Hyden, Kentucky. I went to I was in Clarksville, Tennessee for the NXT show, and then I went over into Kentucky, and I actually went to the one in Dairy Queen over there, and I actually ordered exactly what Jim Cornette and his friends ordered, during the Dairy Queen incident. It was a lot of fun, to do that, and I also like Jim Cornette. At least he speaks his mind. He's a really good roaster, So I'm definitely on the side of listening to what he says, but the biggest thing he did say was definitely a really big self-inflicted wound that AEW did. And I also agree with what he said in this video and another video that definitely if you were to do disciplinary actions, you would more so want to favor CM Punk in the sense that he's like your biggest draw, your biggest star. For example, like let's say, for example, like if John Cena had a backstage skirmish with, with somebody backstage during the mid 2000s. Would it make sense for, Vince McMahon to kind of like side with John Cena and then get rid of that person who's causing a problem with him, or let John Cena go to TNA, or during the Monday Night Wars, they had Shawn Michaels, they had Bret Hart, and a couple of other those wrestlers, and would Vince McMahon want to do something like, if someone was being a jerk to them and antagonizing them, really, like, would you want to just fire them, or would you want to be like, okay, well, they're my biggest draws, so I'm actually going to just, more so side with the draw and whatever, really. And I also kind of agree that if you really look at the footage, as a bunch of people are saying, it wasn't really a real fight. It was just really like a scrap and everything like that. And Jim Cornette was saying that too. Like, honestly, this whole claim that Tony was in fear of his life, like, he did say that that's probably something that his lawyers or other people told him to say, and that's that, really. So I do like how he's trying to just really point out that yes, definitely, Jack Perry was really at fault, and if you were to think if you were to be a really serious business, you would do anything to kind of, really just really support CM Punk to stay, but really just recognize two things: that number one, Jack Perry definitely was antagonizing him, and then Jack Perry's never going to drug like CM Punk, really. So it just made sense to really just to really just just look at it as that they really fumbled their bag on CM Punk. And then also the other thing is that if you listen to the interview, CM Punk said he went to Tony Khan, said, you got to address it. Tony Khan said, what did you want me to do? And then CM Punk addressed Jack Perry, really. So there was also that chance of, okay, well, this is just what we said about Tony Khan, not a lot of proactive leadership. And definitely, there's one concerning thing that he said, like, guys, this, Jim Cornette said, this is not working in a fucking bank. So he's referring basically to how, people look at this footage and they're like, oh my, okay, it was a backstage altercation. Yes, CM Punk did actually push Jack Perry and it started this whole thing, really, So there's mixed feelings to that, honestly, 100%, that's actually kind of wrong. That I think within professional wrestling, yes, there are backstage scraps. There's definitely people putting hands on each other and people roughing each other. There's certain industries where that does happen a lot more than other industries, but still, it's like what I've said, really. Like, imagine if this was like in high school between two people, like for like a wrestling, for like amateur wrestling or whatever. This would probably lead to a suspension or something like that, really. So I do think that just to say that, it wasn't a real fight, or, this isn't, professional wrestling, that's kind of like the environment that happens in it. That's not the best advice to say to anybody. And no, things like this should not happen in any industry. Like, I work in filmmaking. So in filmmaking, there's definitely a lot of bullying. There is a lot of entitlement. There's a lot of, like, sometimes people may get heated and be yelling and screaming and just looks like a fight's about to pop off. I've been on some film sets that are like that, but that's never really appropriate. And just to say, okay, well, that's just what happens in the industry. So when it happens and things get taken, and things and hands get put on somebody, even though it's not severe even though this was not like the worst type of fight that can actually happen. If you were to rate this as a fight, through 1 through 10, this would be a 1 because it's not like it's nothing like like a gang fight or whatever really, but yeah, it's still not. It should not happen, and it should not happen in any industry. And anybody who kind of thinks that okay, well, you can learn from this, that okay, maybe it's overreaction, and this should happen in other backstage professional wrestling industries. You're setting yourself up for failure. So, no matter what, it was still inappropriate, and it shouldn't have happened really. And don't look at this and think that this is okay if you are in the professional wrestling industry. This is going to set you up for trouble. It kind of reminds me of OTRS Central. And OTRS Central was talking about like when Max Caster did the rap, and he did the rap, and he said that line, "What's that smell from North Carolina? Isn't that Julia's?" He's about to say, Julia's vagina. He was saying, OTR Central was saying something like, what, well, if she wanted to start an OnlyFans or something like that, then, or a thirst trap like that, then, it is what it is really. So I remember responding to his comments saying, okay, well, don't listen to what he's saying really, because, if somebody decides to rap and say something inappropriate to somebody else, even if it's professional wrestling or another industry, same idea. You are putting yourself in a position where you may not think it's a big deal, and you're listening to someone who say, well, it's not a big deal, or there may be, another way to look at this. You don't want to put yourself in a situation like that. The next thing they did talk about is that I believe they said that what happened was that AEW aired the footage on their channel, and then they took it down, or they actually uploaded the Young Bucks segment, and they cut out the CM Punk footage and then jumped to the FTR footage. And they talked about how that was kind of stupid really, because it's almost like what are you referring to when they're showing footage, they cut it out and then they're just jumping to the next thing where other wrestlers are referring to that footage. Kind of a dumb look. And they also were talking about how other people, there's people in AEW that are copyright striking people who are uploading the footage. So I think what Jim Cornette is alleging is that there's two things. That maybe they all realized that, okay, showing the footage was counterproductive, or maybe there's a legal situation where CM Punk can actually sue, or another person in the video can actually sue, because they can say, okay, well, this should have been undisclosed, So, but I do think that, the real reason why they've taken it down is really just because of two things. That obviously people are not taking the side of AEW. So it's just more embarrassing. And then also, there are people doing videos where there are some channels where they have CM Punk's interview and they have him talking, and then they have the footage. So it's really just articulating that CM Punk, his story was mostly in the right, really. Maybe over 90% in the right. And then also with that, Jack Perry was saying that Jack Perry was really saying, there was a story that Jack Perry was saying that he really won that fight, and he was kind of the aggressor on CM Punk, really kind of coming off he put CM Punk in his place. So this footage does show Jack Perry as a liar and everything like that, really. And definitely he's friends with the Bucks, so obviously the Bucks don't want Jack Perry looking too bad. And then also with that, I think what Cornette may have overlooked is that the reason why people want to put that footage online is for two things. That obviously if you have if you review wrestling topics like I do, I would love to have that. I would love to show that footage for two reasons. Number one, if I'm doing a video with commentary along with the footage, I can actually, make money off of YouTube if I get 100,000 views. Or there are pirates, where there are people who will just upload that footage on their channel and not even comment on it and be like, okay, well, now it's 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, 5 million views. and they'll be making a bunch of money. Really, like I started doing YouTube. I started making money on YouTube like last week, really, and I think what I'll tell you guys is that I'm still very much an amateur, so I probably made over 11,000, 12,000 views. So I'm probably made like $23. So if I showed that footage and I got 100,000 views, that's $100 really. If I got a million views, maybe I would get, something like, maybe like a few $100s off of it really, So there are people that are just they're not putting it up there to make AEW just look bad. They're just people who are pirates, they will just upload copyrighted footage and then kind of gamble on if it's going to get flagged or not, or they're going to get no copyright strikes or no copyright, no monetization, and then put it up there and make some money off of that. So he definitely overlooked that element. I would also kind of say that I do agree that if you kind of look at this footage and you look at what happened, yes, Cornette was definitely very pro CM Punk, but I do agree with that as well. Really, I do think that obviously he should have really thought about Wembley Stadium and what it does for his company if a skirmish led to a big problem, and then CM Punk should have just had more emotional maturity. But but when you listen to the podcast and you agree with that he was being harassed nonstop, eventually there comes a point where where everything's going to break down really, and there also becomes a point where you're a respected person in the industry and you have a certain level of professionalism and accomplishment, and you just can't be in an environment where you are allowing people to walk all over you. I mean, for example, it's just like having a kid that's a spoiled brat, really. And imagine their parents were both drill instructors and are in charge of people, and then their kid's like saying, okay, now I want to do something like taste a beer. Now I want to do something like, maybe drive a little bit on the road. Or, like I've told you about my younger brother, when my parents were driving, in order to get some attention, he'll be kicking their leg while their arm is on the steering wheel, so the car would swerve like that. It does get to a point where somebody is stepping out of line, and instead of just being cool or just saying, dude, chill, and I'm going to walk away, there comes a point where you have to put somebody in their place. Because otherwise it's going to make you come across as, okay, I'm Ned Flanders. I allow people to walk all over me. So I can understand that, and sometimes that's the only way to get a message across, really, So yeah, it's definitely really unfortunate that all this stuff happened. It's definitely, very counterproductive in a lot of different ways. It's definitely, as Jim Cornette said, it's definitely a self-inflicted wound. It's also kind of makes you question the judgment of AEW, because obviously if they're going to release their biggest star over something like this, instead of saying, okay, well, it makes most sense to get rid of Jack Perry, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company, so if Jack Perry sues or whatever, you know what, I would more so, a lot of people would more so defend CM Punk for money reasons. And then also, you kind of look at this and you can say, okay, this is not, through what people were saying about the Brawlout incident in August 2022, and this is 2023, obviously this is not like the worst type of skirmish or whatever. And I also like what Jim Cornette was saying is that, it's definitely a little questionable about why the Young Bucks didn't narrate over the footage, or they didn't have the audio. Like, what would happen if there was audio in there? Would it incriminate CM Punk more? Would it incriminate Jack Perry a lot more? And also, would airing the audio actually justify, a defamation of character or a slander lawsuit by CM Punk, really? But overall, I really think the big message of Jim Cornette is that it's definitely very self-inflicted. It's definitely counterproductive. And I would also say some things about Jim Cornette, that he's not 100% anti-AEW. There are things that he likes about it. He did talk very highly about CM Punk when he when he showed up on Rampage. And there are some things that he does like. He's like the MJF really. So I do think that he's one of those people that, obviously he doesn't like a lot of the choices AEW makes. That's why he may come off as anti-AEW. But I think if AEW started making better choices and they had better booking and then they looked at the show and said, you know what, we should be focusing on Battle of the Belts. We should be focusing on Dynasty. We should be focusing on, talking a little bit about what it means to have their 5th anniversary show at the MGM casino. And then also, very sadly, guess what happened this week in AEW? Their other big piece of news is that they announced their pay-per-view schedule for the rest of the year. And now you have this thing that's like super like negative, so this was not, so it was a self-inflicted wound really. And then as some people, and then as the final thing they said, that the dumb thing about this is that you look at Windy City Riot, what happened with Jack Perry. A lot of people were chanting CM Punk. You look at what Jack Perry was doing. He was coming out with the Chicago flag. He was coming out with Cry Me a River. So he's kind of like mooching off of how CM Punk got more popular because of this. And, if you want to do something like have the match with FTR versus the Young Bucks, people will be chanting CM Punk to really root for FTR or really root for the Young Bucks. So it was counterproductive, really, in a lot of different ways. And it kind of just showed really that, this was not a very good business decision to get rid of CM Punk over Jack Perry. And then also too, just showing this footage was very counterproductive, and it kind of makes you question if they're going to get into legal trouble and actually lose more money. And also it was really counterproductive with the other things that that AEW was trying to accomplish this month really. And like I've said, like you look at last week, Super Card of Honor, I think they drew less than 5,000 people, maybe 4,300 people, but they spent time on television. Instead of talking about that, they actually had Edge, just be like a hype man for AEW, really, so definitely they really need to get past the CM Punk stuff. This should have never really aired. I do agree with what some people are saying. If they wanted to show this, they should have showed this at All Out in Chicago or the Collision Show. But this is old news. This was just to exploit the incident for ratings, and it definitely shows that AEW, they're not thinking long term. They're not thinking about. They were thinking more about shock and awe. They were not really thinking about themselves long term, really. And a lot of attention could be put on making a better show, and also just finding people in the industry like Dustin Rhodes, maybe Pat Patterson. I think. Briscoe and a few other people and Scott D'Amore and a few other people that maybe Tony Khan should be hiring to help out with his booking so that he can make a better show really. So counterproductive is the big word, and Jim Cornette definitely articulates that. And like I've told all you guys in a couple of my videos, that definitely this is a good example in life about what happens when you choose to be vindictive and you're focusing on embarrassing somebody, even if they were a jerk, or even if they cause you or your company a problem, really. For example, and then not building yourself upwards. For example, how AEW is handling the CM Punk aftermath. They need to go from the CM Punk, post CM Punk era to the rebuilding era, or the rebuilding era of AEW, or you look at WWE, for example, in response to the Vince McMahon scandal, The Rock and Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, a lot of people were really hustling WrestleMania 40 and putting a lot of attention on their shows and making it really big and strong and all that, and they had their most profitable show. They could have said something like, okay, it's not going to sell out. Let's show footage of Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis to show that they're very bad people, and that everybody should be blaming them, not WWE. Separate the sinner from the company, type of thing, really. So, who do you want to be like? Do you want to be like WWE and build yourself upwards when somebody is causing a problem, or maybe there's other people causing a problem, but you want to kind of scapegoat somebody, or do you want to, or if somebody speaks badly and you disagree with them, you want to you want to embarrass them? Do you want to be focusing on that, or do you want to like sometimes, as my old counselor said, revenge is the best success. I think that, as I said, that you don't really that AEW really needs to learn from WWE in this case and learn from The Rock and other people. Be like, okay, we're going to make some really big show. We have a couple of big shows. We got to treat it like a big deal, and really their redemption is like really what are they going to do on Dynamite and Rampage and Collision this week to really put over Dynasty. I mean, what are they going to do on Rampage and Collision this week to put over Dynasty? What about maybe having one or two more matches on the card and then being like, okay, we're going to actually do a little bit of a practice of, building up to it. Little Bang Bang Scissor Gang versus, the Bang Bang Club versus Max Caster versus the Acclaim. What would happen if they said, okay, well, we're going to put attention into this, or maybe we should have Max Caster do a rap, maybe we should have Max Caster do a music video to really hype that. What would happen if they said, okay, well, Dalton Castle got a bunch of attention, so maybe what we can do is on the ROH show and on a few other shows, we can actually just put over Dalton Castle and give him a match on this card, really, So what would happen if we said, okay, well, Swerve and Joe, you know what? You see two vicious people. Maybe we should talk about that on both Dynamite and Collision, and then we should say it should be a St. Louis death match. Really show us the next three shows that you have, Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision, that you more so care about. Your show care about Dynasty. You more so care about, people being hyped for Dynasty, and then also your wrestlers being hyped for, the Casino Battle Royale, what it means for AEW to have your 5th anniversary show. Show us that AEW needs to show us that they care about that, versus another week of CM Punk. Or if you have Tony Khan come down or on the screens talk about this any further, he's just shooting himself in the foot, really. So, definitely self-inflicted wound, definitely counterproductive, and Jim Cornette definitely articulates it, and I agree with him with over 90% of the things, 95% of the things that he's saying with all this. So, even though it may seem harsh, there's definitely a lot of constructive criticism that AEW can learn from when they listen to Jim Cornette.